And we are live just a couple minutes early today. I am kind of snaking through on a hope that we don't have any weather interruptions. We've got storms just raging through here right now, but the winds died down and lights haven't even flickered yet. So hopefully we don't end up with a disruption because I'm excited about this interview. There is few things in the world to get me more excited than really awesome mushrooms in many ways, whether it's part of ecology or going in my belly. I grew up in the northeastern United States, specifically Pennsylvania, and the thought of it actually having to anyway cultivate mushrooms there was kind of crazy. They were just everywhere if you knew where to forage for them. And now I live in Texas in an area that's actually a lot like the Northeast for part of the year and a lot like the Arizona desert for another part of the year. So it's a little more difficult. But I've been using mushrooms in my composting for a very long time. As a finishing agent for my bioreactor compost, which takes a full year to complete, specifically King Stropharia and oysters. But I found some things on our guest website that are going to lead me to some other questions about maybe, even though those are great for the garden, maybe I should be using something different. And we'll go on this journey of discovery together. My guest, Olga, will be on and with us in just a moment. She's from Mushroom Mountain. I have used these folks many times in the past. And I recently reached out to them about doing a discount for MSB. We announced that last week when I was out of town, so we didn't really do a justice to it. So we'll hit that harder today. But you can now, if you're a member, get 15% off site-wide at mushroommountain.com. Premier supplier into this space, and we'll bring Olga on in just a minute. Before we do, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsors of the day. In particular today, I'm one of our sponsors. I have my new book coming out on the 12th of May, Laws of Life. The ambassador program is closed, except we do have one more platinum ambassador. When Tom set up all the ambassadors, he realized one guy signed up twice, contacted him, and yeah, it was a mistake. So we have one open. That's by email only, TSPC in the subject line. First person to email me can have that. Otherwise, just get by the site, fill out the form, and you'll know a couple days before launch that you can pick the book up. I put a lot of my life into this book, 67,000 words of wisdom and hard-won wisdom at that. This will be a great book for you, but it'll also be a great book to share with others, specifically people like, let's say, 15 to 35, trying to really establish their life. This is what I would have wrote to myself if I could have written myself a letter back when I was 20 years old and struggling and coming up in the world. Next up today, actual sponsor, and one that's been around a while, knifekits.com. They've been a sponsor of my podcast since 2010. That is 15 years. I don't know many podcasts that last 15 years, let alone sponsorships of podcasts that last that long. But if you want to learn how to make knives, it's really easy to do at knifekits.com. It's exactly what it sounds like. You can get kits that help you step-by-step process right through the process of making your own knife. Maybe, if you're a granddad, make one with your grandson. Talk about a family heirloom. Your first knife won't be perfect, but it will be a first step. And if you're already really experienced, they have all the raw materials, Damascus steel, buffalo horn, mammoth tusk, you name it, they've got it all. And they do a discount for MSB members as well. Next up today, wealthsteading.com, the Wealthsteading podcast from John Pugliano. I've also been working with John since 2010, not as a sponsor because he didn't even have a podcast when I met him. He's an awesome investment manager, but he's also one of us. He's a prepper. He's a homesteader. He's a ham radio operator. He's a hunter. He's a reloader. He does bullet casting. He is, again, one of us, not some stiff guy in a suit. Comes to all the events. He was just with us up in Tennessee at LFTN. So check out his podcast about once to twice a week. Great investment wisdom, the same investment, the same view into the current market that he's using in managing his clients. He'll share with you absolutely for free at wealthsteading.com. And with that, I want to bring our special guest, Olga, on. And I haven't said your last name. I'm going to try it now. Katic?
It's
Katic. Did I get it wrong?
Cottage, but you can say Katic.
See, that's why I didn't say it, right?
Yeah,
at least without you here to correct me, because I hate when somebody says my name wrong. And I also have a short name that everybody butchers. So
is it Spirico?
Spirico, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
okay.
But you could imagine the ways it's been pronounced. It's Spirtu, and it's like I don't understand, whatever. Anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
If we could start out with, instead of just diving into the subject, let's go back to before this was what you did. And how did you find mushrooms and decide to like make this a career, build a business on it, things like that?
Well, I'm from Croatia, which is ex-Yugoslavia, and when we were kids, we lived out in the country. My parents had to work, and so my grandma had to watch my sister and I, and we'd be outside all day long. We didn't have phones, we didn't have, like toys or anything like that. We were poor, and we lived off the land. And my grandparents would send us out into the woods foraging for strawberries, for mushrooms, for, all kinds of things. And it was always exploration time for us. And so we'd be in the woods picking milk mushrooms and agaricus and boletes and morels, and maybe kicking some here and there, dispersing the spore clouds into the air. And so I just grew up in nature, basically. And then after the war happened in Croatia, we had to leave. We moved to Austria, and then we moved to Germany, then we moved to Canada, and then from Canada down to Florida, where I went to school for astrophysics. And then after that, I got my degree in web design and marketing. But that nature was always still within me, And once I started working, building websites for high-end hotels, I met my ex-husband, Trad, and him and we started Mushroom Mountain down in Florida. And since Florida, it can be like up in like a little bit of a north of Florida, there's a bunch of mushrooms, but not the diversity is not really there in like Boca Raton. So we moved up here to South Carolina, to the upstate, where, the diversity of mushrooms is just really out there. We have so many mushroom species up here in the Appalachia. And so that's where Mushroom Mountain rooted itself in. We started working out of our house. We transformed one of our rooms into a laboratory, and we used to cook all of our substrate on the stove in this gigantic pressure cooker. And then once we outgrew that, we bought Mushroom Mountain, our current space, where we have a beautiful laboratory. I have 8 employees. We're a great team. We make tons and tons of spawn every year. We also make mushroom extracts, and I also teach wild mushroom certification, which is it's basically a course where you learn different species of mushrooms, wild mushrooms, and how to pick them, how to identify them, how to store them, and et cetera, et cetera. And then you can sell the mushrooms at the market. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's funny how many people have this similar path. Like, I actually have had somebody that started out in astrophysics before they became an author, and not of astrophysics stuff, but whether it's engineering, like there's all types of paths people take that you go into a world that you can hobnob and make really good money and all that. And maybe it requires a lot of intellectual rigor, but then you end up in this position where you just don't feel human, I guess is the way to put it. And people find solace in actually following what they're passionate about. Like, if you're super passionate about astrophysics, then that might work for you. But if your passion is nature, then a mathematical board may not really do it for you after a while.
Right. This is totally true.
So let's start with the basics. What role do mushrooms actually play in soil creation, and why is that important?
Right. So mushrooms or fungi, mushrooms are really just like a fruit of a fungus, or that vast mycelial mat, right? They're nature's recyclers. So they basically break down woody material. You think about logs, you think about trees, you think about little twigs on the ground, leaves, any of that stuff. They break that stuff down. So and they're super important in the ecosystem because of that. If we start with the fungi that are saprophytes, which means that basically feed on woody debris, they're designed to break down the lignin and the cellulose into much smaller components, getting them ready for microbes and plants, breaking them down into very small things that are digestible for other soil beings. Without fungi, none of this would happen, and we would have debris piling up everywhere and basically no soil. And then you have another type of fungus, which is a fungi, and these they mycelium threads their hyphae into the roots of the plants, and they act as little information highways, binding the whole forest ecosystems together, and which allows for communication and nutrient delivery. And this way, large trees, they have access to sunlight. Who have access to sunlight, they're able to photosynthesize, and they can actually deliver the light as food to smaller trees and plants that are shaded out. So fungi are super important in the ecosystem of nature. They're basically foundational to healthy ecosystems, literally and figuratively.
And I mean, I speak about this all the time, but coming from your angle, I'd like you to maybe discuss a little bit about some of the soil problems that we have today, and then specifically the role that fungi can play in helping to restore these natural systems. Because, you know, in my course on cover cropping alone, for instance, I have these pictures, and you look at them, you're like, that looks like a picture from the Dust Bowl, and it's a picture from 2003, right? Like, so it's almost like we've learned nothing since then, except how to mitigate our disaster a little bit more. We haven't actually fixed anything.
Right. Well, we do have this big problem world, which is basically, you know, population. It's rising, right? And we need food. And so I guess we figured out that if we plant like these gigantic fields of monoculture and you know, like these crops that we need to sustain us, it was going to be an easier way to grow food for ourselves, especially if we can crop dust them with all kinds of you know, pesticides and fertilizers, and that way we make more money. You know, you make get more profit and stuff like that. But it's a huge problem, really. It's planting monocultures and then dousing them with these chemical fertilizers and pesticides really brings the whole system into trouble. The soil becomes completely sterile. We till, and whatever fungi are there already in the soil, when we till, they basically just disappear. But without fungi, there's no nutrients in the soil, because fungi are decomposers. They break stuff down. And so, you know, we have to, like these plants, we have to give them something if there is no fungi. So we fertilize them. That's where chemical fertilizers come in. And then the plants will take up whatever they need and from these chemical fertilizers. And since there's no fungi in the soil to create any structure, it all gets the rest leftover gets washed into rivers and finally into the ocean. And then what happens is that these fertilizers, once they're in the ocean, you have like too much food for algae, and then you get these giant algal blooms, right? And then what happens with that? Like then the fish start dying because there's too much algae, right? And not only that, you also have like all this algae being washed off onto beaches, which further pollutes and then denies access to the beaches. Algae, they like when there's too much of it, they produce these gases that are very nauseous, and they're just, you know, you can't even like walk around it at all. And so then the tourism industry suffers as well, right? And but let's go back to the soil, back to the field. Now that the soil is devoid of nutrients because you don't have any fungi, the plants, you know, you get erosion and you get more soil loss. Like when there's no structure in the soil, you get one bad storm, and all of the topsoil that you have created, like thus far, with growing these crops and maybe putting some cover crops on top of that, and then putting that into soil, it all gets washed off very, very quickly, you know. And so we have to make up for it, so, you know, to grow more plants. But at this point it's just impossible, and so the cycle just basically continues, right? It's a broken system, you know. We're destroying the planet, and it's just terrible. And another thing about mushrooms and plants, when you feed plants chemical fertilizers, they actually forget about their symbiotic relationship with fungi, and they actually prefer the synthetic fertilizer, which is kind of like a junk food to them, you know. And so when fungi are gone, the soil becomes sterile. There's no microbes in there. It just causes there isn't any food for them either, because the fungi break down the debris to make it available for the microbes as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I mean, in
so
that whole microbial community, we have bacteria and fungi, and the bacteria can only do so much. And
it's correct. Yeah.
both play a huge role in nutrient cycling. The big thing fungi do that the bacteria don't is fungi are your internet, they're your
That's right.
infrastructure, your communications highway. So we go and we kill the fungi with this repeated process of chemical and plow.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about that, like if you go into war with an enemy nation, and I don't mean like these little one
Mm-hmm.
off, we're going to blow up a bridge here or like shoot this guy there, like full, like World War II style nation on nation warfare. The first thing you bomb is the highways and communication systems. Because if you shut down the ability to move
Correct.
materials and communicate, you overwhelm the enemy. So that's what we're doing to our soil. What a great idea. Let's destroy their communication and
Right.
transportation infrastructure, because that's what like the mycorrhizal fungi and other fungi in the soils really are. And they
That's
even
right.
let plants communicate with each other. Like they've done
That's
studies
right.
where like you have these plants and like this one pepper plant gets hit by some sort of biological agent, what's a pest or a disease, and it
Mm-hmm.
literally sends out like an alert.
It
It
does.
goes through the fungi and tells all the other pepper plants, hey, this thing is here. And then plants are like chemical factories. That's why like 98% of plants in the world are toxic to be eaten. Right.
Right.
Like, and it's because
Mm-hmm.
they can't run away, they can't bite, they maybe they can poke you, but they have
Right.
these chemical, right? They can't get away like an animal can. They can't bite you. So they use chemical defenses, and they use chemical defenses against pests and diseases as well, but they have to know. So
This
you're
is
taking away the ability of these plants to communicate with each other.
that. Yeah, this is correct. This is correct. This is exactly what happens in the forest, like where you have like these healthy ecosystems is these mycorrhizal fungi, they thread their hyphae into the roots of the trees, which so it creates like these informational highways. These can communicate and exchange nutrients and things. And also the mushrooms, what they do when they're inside of threaded inside, they give the trees more absorption power of other nutrients and water, so that we keep like water in the soil, like you don't have to waste much, and it's just like it's a beautiful symbiosis right there. It really is. But with our soils that the way they are right now, we're growing these crops that are completely devoid of nutrients. If you think about it, when you grow your own tomato, like everybody talks about this, everybody says when they grow their first tomato and they bite into it, it is so juicy, it is so sweet, it has like this complex like a taste to it. The tomato from the store, not so much, right? So, we got to grow food a better way. We got to get better at this for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of like the most well-known mushrooms for doing things like this is King Stropharia, and I know it's a big part of what you wanted to
Hmm.
talk about today. In
It
fact,
is.
today's episode is called Fungal
Right.
Foundations: King Stropharia's Gift, right? And I will give credit to
Yes.
AI to help me come up with that King Stropharia's gift, right? But I was like, that's perfect, right? And I love that mushroom. I love to eat that mushroom. Um, on this, maybe you can also throw in like why we never see this commercially. I think it doesn't travel well because it's a fantastic mushroom. I've never seen it in a store. I've never seen it at a farmer's market. But it's a delicious mushroom.
Right.
But it's also a
It,
standout when it comes to building soil, right?
it is. It does, yeah. Well, all mushrooms are really really good at doing this, but King Stropharia is very special because it produces edible fruit. You can grow it. There's the King Stropharia, there's a bluet mushroom, and there's a few other ones that grow on the ground that we actually can cultivate. And but King Stropharia is very special because it gets like gigantic, really really big fruit. That's why we call it the garden giant. We also call it the wine cap because when you cook it in wine, it just tastes like absolutely delicious. So it's a great mushroom to plant because, first of all, it's easy to cultivate, right? Second of all, it brings an extra kick into your garden. So like I explained before, its mycelium will thread through like the all the soil, and it's eating these wood chips that you give it to eat. And the mat, like it just threading through everything, it holds soil together, right? It holds it together, prevents erosion, right? Then it breaks down all of these. What it takes 100 to, I think, 1,000 years to create 1 inch of soil on its own without mushrooms at all, right? With these mushrooms, you get soil in 6 months. You know what I mean? So it's amazing. So you don't need to be going to Home Depot and buying pots or whatever to amend your garden. All you need is some wood chips, that you find at like the tree companies. They cut down trees all the time, right? And they don't know how to get rid of them because they have to pay to drop them off at the dump, right?
Yep.
So you can either go to the dump and get free wood chips there, or you can have them deliver it to your house, and then you have this pile of wood chips, and then you have food for these mushrooms.
Yep.
And so, right. And so with planting this mushroom, you also don't need to water your garden as much because it helps retain moisture in there, right? In your garden. Then it also kills certain bacteria. It kills Salmonella, E. coli. Okay. It kills nematodes, like harmful nematodes in the soil. It just completely dissolves them, right? It also attracts earthworms, which then aerate your soil, which is a beautiful thing, right? And earthworms, they also are threading through there and eating like all kinds of things, and they're depositing their vermicompost, which is another amazing thing for your soil. Meanwhile, you have your plants are growing there. You got your tomatoes, you got your cucumbers, you got your blueberry plant, whatever. And the mushrooms or the fungi, they're breaking down all of this woody debris and putting back carbon into the soil, putting back in nitrogen, phosphorus, like all of this food that it needs to be able to grow these beautiful leaves and beautiful fruits and everything. And then in the end, you have your plants create shade for the mushrooms so they can fruit. How beautiful is that?
That's perfect.
And that's why King Stropharia is like one of my favorite mushrooms. Yeah.
And it does seem to be one of the mushrooms that we don't have to get super fussy about. Like, we don't need a chamber, like, with perfect controls, right? And we're not necessarily in a lab coat doing this. That it can be as simple as spreading out some good sawdust spawn, mulching over top of it, keeping the area moist. Like,
that's right.
That's it. Keep your garden moist anyway, right?
Right. You don't need to sterilize no wood chips or sterilize any sawdust like I do in the lab to make the spawn for you guys, because they thrive. King Stropharia thrives on bacteria to be able to fruit. It actually needs soil bacteria to fruit. So yeah, you just need wood chips that are like up to let's say 2-3 months. Okay. And you can use them. All you need to do is just make sure they're very, very hydrated, and then just spread them around your plants with your spawn, and you're pretty much done. You just watch the magic happen.
I think one really great thing about King Stropharia too, it's a very distinctive mushroom. So if you inoculate your garden with it and mushrooms pop up and it's not King Stropharia, you're not going to eat the wrong one. If you just look at a picture. I mean, you know way more about shrooms than I do, but I have never seen anything that really is a look-alike. Like, there's a false morel, right?
Right.
You really have to not be paying attention, but it sort of looks like it. Like, I've seen nothing that looks like a Stropharia.
There's some lookalikes, but none of them kind of like to a beginner. They might be lookalikes, like some agaricus look like that. Like the King Stropharia has purple black spores. That's one of the way of identifying mushrooms. And then agaricus, they also have dark spores, right? So that could be like one thing where people are kind of iffy about it. There's some other fungi that are lookalikes, but they grow on logs. Like you will never find them growing out of the ground. So they're very distinct. Yeah, they're they have like the beautiful like reddish maroon brown cap. They can get pretty large.
They can get huge,
like dinner plates, literally.
Yeah.
And then they have like this frilly, like a frilly thing, like all the way around the cap. And sometimes it has a ring around the stem. And then the stem is like completely white. And And then even the mycelium is very distinct, believe it or not. It's very stringy and it's very like a cord-like. So you can always like I dig into the soil, and I always know when I find the Stropharia mycelium.
Yeah.
So
While we're
beautiful.
talking, I'll go ahead and bring your
Yeah,
page
look at
up.
that.
Like we're sitting here trying to explain it. And I'm like, well, at least for the video people, we have like
Yeah.
could just show them. Yeah, and that's
Right. Look how gorgeous
not
it is.
even a big one, guys. That's
that is a baby.
typical of
That is a baby. And if you
they
pull up
are
the
one of
first
the
picture,
they're one of the few mushrooms I've been able to actually get to produce for me outdoors here where I live in Central Texas, right?
okay, yeah.
I actually am using them in my composting. I do a kind of composting called bioreactor composting.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a static pile method. It does go through a thermophilic cycle, but that's going to last maybe 6 to 12 days. Once the temperature goes, core temperature drops below 80 degrees, I add worms. And then a few weeks later, I pull back my wood chip cap and I add either Stropharia or I've done various versions of oysters. And both of those, if I get the compost made early enough to get them in early enough before our real heat arrives, I'll get a bunch of fruiting. I also get a ton. If I do nothing, I end up, and this is mostly coop straw and wood chips that are sitting out in my field. Some are 5 years old. I get massive flush right after the thermal cycle, sometimes even during it, of what we call LBMs, which just means little brown mushrooms, and I don't know what they are, so I don't mess with that. But that just shows you like the fungal nature of that thing to begin with, and that's the whole point of bioreactor compost. We want a fungal dominated compost versus a bacterial dominated thermophilic compost.
Mm-hmm. Well, you just mentioned earlier your coop, like a straw from your chicken coops and things like that.
Yeah.
This is another thing that King Stropharia is really amazing for, is that it kills the E. coli that comes out like from chicken poop, right? So you actually use it to break down all of your chicken poop around the yard, and then there's no smell. There's no smell to your chicken coop at all. So plant your King Stropharia definitely around your chicken coop as well.
That sounds like a great. Well, don't eat them because I have ducks, and
your ducks are eating your mushrooms.
Ducks will eat mushrooms fast, man. See, the reactors are about 4 foot high. They can't get in there, and they don't even know because it kind of sinks down about a foot after it starts cooking. So they can't get in there. But wherever a mushroom pops up, like ducks, if they don't eat it, they tear it apart looking for other things because like slugs will get them on them and stuff. Ducks are mushroom destroyers. Like the only wild mushrooms I get here is like destroying angel.
Oh my god!
Right, and turkey tail. That's the only thing that just shows up on its own, other than the LBMs and the compost. We do get turkey tail, but I got some like old oak and stuff out in the back that hasn't been removed yet, and they'll form on the stumps of those and stuff like that.
Yeah, turkey tail are amazing. They're great. They're a great mushroom. You can't eat it because it's so like like cardboard.
It's like wood. Yeah, it's like balsa wood.
Yeah, but you can put it into soups, and make a turkey tail stock, or you can make extracts out of them as well. Really good for your immune system. Really, really good.
Can you talk maybe before we start digging in like medicinal stuff, because I want to talk about that too.
Yeah.
Just when people hear like breakdown, compost, whatever, there is a difference. Like, and all of these elements have a role. Healthy systems have all of them, but basically your kind of macro levels for decomposers is you have fungi, you have bacteria, and you have animals, some of the arthropods, earthworms, etc. But they play different roles in that soil ecosystem. How are fungi differentiated from the others?
Well, I call fungi like the first responders. They're there, like they break down the woody debris to make it more palatable for smaller, like your bacteria and your other friends in the yard, right? But they do compete with other fungi for substrate. So the first one that shows up gets to eat, right? Mm-hmm. 2 spores will land on a log and they germinate. They create hyphae, which then forms that mat called mycelium. And then they start breaking down the lignin and the cellulose. They metabolize it, making the wood softer for organisms like bacteria. And meanwhile, they're releasing other nutrients into the soil, which we talked about, which makes them digestible for plants as well. So they basically return carbon into the soil. So yeah, I mean, they're always the first ones to show up because bacteria on their own cannot break down wood, right? And some bugs will eat like woody material, but they can't eat all of it.
No,
And mushrooms
no.
are everywhere. They're just everywhere. Like we're right now breathing in spores, like into our lungs, and they're always hanging out. They're very competitive, and they're very, there's a word for it. They are, not competitive, but
Adaptive.
adaptive as well. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So
Opportunistic.
amazing. Opportunistic. That's
Yeah,
the word.
yeah, yeah. They find a niche where that spore gets
Right.
in. And
That's why.
early,
Yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was
Oh,
just
I was.
saying.
You go. You go.
Anyway, earlier we were talking about how if the plant grows without microorganisms, it basically unlearns its innate intelligence of how to get nutrients from the soil,
Right.
and then it becomes chemically dependent. It also becomes pH dependent because all of these artificial fertilizers rely on actually a very narrow band of pH. So you have chemical fertility, you have ecological fertility. Like we're putting nitrogen on the soil when 78% of the atmosphere is nitrogen. You really
Right.
got to let that kind of sink in, like it's because you've destroyed the biology. But when a seed germinates, there is an innate intelligence in plants. And I try not to plantomorphize. Like they don't think like we do. I'm not saying that. I'm giving an analogy here, but there's an association that plant wants to make with soil biology. And its first association it wants to make is fungal, particularly mycorrhizal. It wants to get involved with fungus from the beginning. And if that plant grows to a certain age without that association, it becomes difficult to make. Now, at least the fungi are active enough, unlike the bacteria, that they'll kind of, hey, you're doing it anyway type of thing, right?
Right.
The bacterial associations, if that's not there, they'll never learn how to do it.
Right.
And so we want that bioactive soil right from the beginning so that when we put that transplant in, or, if we're growing our own transplant, like I build my potting soil from bioreactor compost and biochar as a lightener, right? Like that's pretty much all it is.
Right.
And I want to infuse that fungal association from the day that plant first sticks a root. I want that association before it's even the leaves come out, right?
Right.
Before
Yeah.
it even comes out of the soil, just that little rootlet. I want it already doing that because that's the plant that, 6 weeks later, when it's a nice little stocky plant and you throw its sap in a Brix meter, it's going to throw a Brix reading of like 8, 10, 12 out of the sap. And then you're not going to have pest problems once you get like 10 and above on a Brix reading on a plant. And you will not find a plant with a Brix reading of like an 8 or higher of its sap, not its fruit, that the soil doesn't have fungi in it. It is not. I've never seen it. I just spent a week with Alan Booker. He knows way more about this than both of us put together. He's never seen it. Like you have to have that fungal association.
You do. Yes. Yes. You need that complexity in the soil. We can't just be growing plants. No wonder we're so sick as a nation now.
Yeah.
Like, the whole planet is sick. We get all of these diseases that we don't even know how to fix anymore, but it all comes back down to nutrition and how complex our soil is. If we don't have the fungi and the microbes and the earthworms and all of these things together, the food is just not nutrient dense. It isn't.
Yeah.
There's no nutrients at all in it. So yeah.
And then there's this interplay, right? Because that earthworm is not that you have in your little, whether it's your compost or it's in your worm farm, whatever, and you throw those strawberry tops in there. He's not eating that.
Right.
He's not eating that. Like he's actually cultivating bacteria and fungi to break that down, and he's eating the result of that breakdown. He's eating the slurry.
That's right.
So the worm is actually farming fungi and bacteria to do a pre-digestion for the worm. And you start taking any of these elements out, and we go downhill so fast.
Yes.
And that's why I have pictures of one of my courses where it looks like the dude's standing on like a ridge above a cutout road, and it's about a 6-foot drop, but it's not a road, it's a field. It's a field that's been tilled for 100 years. And he's on the native prairie where it hasn't been tilled. So over 100 years, that field lost 6 foot.
Yeah.
Any place other than the American Midwest, and that field would be it would be sit on gravel, right?
Yeah.
We had so much topsoil there, so much of a blessing, and we destroyed it. We literally destroyed it. Like you said, we can build this back way faster than we lost it.
That's
if we go back to these practices.
Yeah, we can.
Do you remember kind of the first time you saw mushrooms transforming a landscape? or soil firsthand, and what that was like, because it seems like that's probably a big, like I've talked to a lot of mushroom people, and they're like, well, here's how you grow mushrooms. You're the first person I've talked to that's like, use the mushrooms to improve the soil. Some will use it as a sales benefit, but it's kind of an afterthought. Like there had to be something that hit you that like, oh, this is the way.
Right. Yeah. First time I planted King Stropharia, and I planted it right here in my yard, and I just could not believe how quickly it broke down all of those wood chips. Otherwise, they'd be sitting there for years. Like if it wasn't for the mushrooms, and just digging into the soil with my hands, and that loaminess and the darkness of this rich, like it's like gold. It's like you're holding literally gold. So I was really, really excited about that. And when we moved our operation into our there, here in South Carolina, we have like clay soil, and it's like really compacted. And you like, when you want to like plant a garden, you kind of have to almost like till, because otherwise you can't, like, there's no way to put the plants in the ground, right? So I was like thinking, well, instead of doing this, instead of tilling, instead of digging and trying to put plants in, why don't we just build the beds upwards, like, so you are, so I have like all of these logs, rotten logs, and I have like cardboard, and I have compost from my kitchen, and I have mycelium, and I'm like, all right, let's put this together. So I just started building my beds up and planting my vegetable plants that way. And then, didn't have to like work hard to dig into the soil. And I was actually building inches and inches of soil, where my plants were like totally flourishing. So it was definitely an eye opener for me once I planted that King Stropharia for the first time, when I saw it break down those wood chips so quickly and transform it into this black, beautiful soil.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing. Now on that, when I was on your site, I was probably like, I've been to your site before to buy stuff, and I knew what I wanted, so I just grabbed it and got it and took off.
Yeah.
Now, getting ready for this interview and working with you now as an MSB supporter, I dug deeper into your site, and I found this page I'm about to bring up here that is titled "Grows on Compost," and the two that I've been using in my composters are, again, various oysters and King Straff. Some of these I've heard of. I know exactly what an almond portobello is. I know what a bluet is, and it's too hot down here for those. But like there's idea, giant milky, you have a patty straw, parasol. I don't know those. Shaggy mane, I do know that mushroom. Are these better choices for what I'm doing? And because I am getting results with. I did blue oyster last year. They fruited like crazy. I've got Stropharia in now, and it's nowhere near ready to do that yet. But when I kind of look under the wood chips, it's like white mycelium going everywhere. But would these maybe be better for compost application?
I think that for your application, the King Stropharia is going to be the best, because it's really good for the temperatures that you have down there, even though it's really, really hot in Texas. Almond portobello would be good, but it fruits only in like a hot summer, for example.
I have that.
The giant milky, the giant milky does the same. You need like really high temperatures for that. It's not native here, but it would do well if you grew this mushroom in containers. The giant milky, you can grow it in containers, and then use that leftover soil, like after it has fruited, and you put it into your garden. It would be just as great. Although it wouldn't overwinter, right?
Yeah.
So the giant milky would not overwinter, and neither would the almond portobello. And then what was some other ones? The bluet will, the King Stropharia will. The scroll down a little bit. Okay, we have the patty straw. That's also a very hot fruiting mushroom, and
really?
they do. They like temperatures from like 95 to 110.
Okay.
But it would not survive the winter again. Okay.
Don't care, because the compost is going to get ripped up and moved anyway. So
right. Yeah. So you just have to keep replanting it every year. Whereas the King Stropharia, it naturalizes it and becomes native right there into the soil, as long as the earthworms don't eat it, because earthworms, they can smell that sweet mycelium, and they go in there and they'll eat it. Right. So Yeah, so with the King Stropharia, you kind of have to move your beds around your yard every year, right? But
Yeah.
it becomes native. It stays there. So, but these other ones they won't. So kind of like annuals and perennials, right?
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
Yeah,
And you basically have a perennial that you grow as an annual in some climates. That's what a pepper
right.
is, right? Like
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you live somewhere that doesn't freeze, you can have pepper bush tree that's
That's
5 years
right.
old. Like
That's
I was
right.
I was talking about this yesterday. You go to St. Augustine, Florida, and you walk through Old Town, and there's pots everywhere full of Natal peppers, and
Hmm.
no one replants
Yeah,
them. They just make
right.
it through the winter there because it doesn't
Mhm.
get that cold.
That's right.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, how can everyday gardeners or land stewards use mushrooms? Like, what is the actual process, and what would
Mhm.
be the right mushrooms? I mean, King Straff obviously is a great garden mushroom, but there are
Right.
others too.
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. All you need is really there's three ways you can do it. The first way, which is the easiest, is to if you already have an established garden, you just need wood chips, really, and maybe some straw.
Okay.
Straw to cover it up so it can retain moisture because mycelium it needs moisture to be able to travel and go through the soil, right, and keep eating. So all you need is hydrated wood chips and the spawn, and then you put your hydrated wood chips into some kind of bin. You mix in the spawn in there, and then you just spread it around your garden. Or you could even you don't even have to put it in a garden. You can put it as walkways around your
So
garden.
would you do that over like what I used to do? I just pull the mulch back,
Hmm.
lay the sawdust, lay the spawn down, and return the mulch. Would I be better off mixing it prior to applying the mulch? Is what you're saying?
It would be better if you mix it because
Okay.
then you have a larger area where, or it's the mycelium will colonize it faster. So you
Okay.
get soil creation much quicker like that. Um, if you are making a new bed, what I usually do is I get cardboard and I rip off all of the tape and all of that off of it, and I wet it down really really well. And if you have just a lot of grass that you want to get rid of, or your weeds or whatever, you put down your cardboard, hydrated cardboard. Then you put a very thin layer of wood chips, and then you sprinkle your spawn on top of that, and then you can do like a few layers like that, which I call lasagna mushroom gardening, right? And your last layer is going to be straw again just so it stays hydrated. Now don't make this mistake. I just hydrated the straw and I put it on top of the whole thing, and then next year I was growing wheat. Which is
Okay.
not good. You don't want that unless you want to bake bread, then grow wheat, whatever. But I would cook the straw before you put it on top of it so it kills all of the seeds. Some people say, oh, like wheat straw when it's picked, it doesn't have any seed in it. Yes, it does. It
Yes, it
definitely
does.
does. Yeah.
And it
Uh,
has its seed and it has other seeds, right?
right.
Because when
Exactly.
you put it down in a coop for bedding,
Yeah.
when the ducks and chickens come home that night, they're like,
Yeah.
woohoo, party, new stuff, right? Like,
Become happy.
yeah,
Happy
yeah.
birds. Yeah. Yeah. And then the third way you can do it is you can do doing permaculture. You can do your logs. You pile up a bunch of logs and you pile up a bunch of straw and your compost and your dried leaves that you had picked up, your dried grasses that you had picked in the fall, and you integrate that together with the wood chips and the mycelium in there, and then you have a garden that is above the ground, and you can plant it up with all kinds of plants, and like the mushrooms will break all that stuff down, all the logs, and invite all of this ecosystem into it.
So kind of
And
like a mushroom driven hugel culture.
that's right, Hugo
Okay.
culture. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So as long so when you're planting these mushrooms, you don't want to go like any more than 6 inches. That's going to be like your perfect height or perfect depth of your mushroom bed, because any deeper than 6 inches, you have anaerobic like anaerobic conditions happen, and then the mycelium will die.
Yeah.
So six
Yeah.
inches, that's it. Okay. Yeah,
Very
so that's
cool.
your three ways of doing it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. For folks that are new to all this, right, and they kind of want to do it, what is maybe one misconception about mushrooms that you'd love to bust?
Well, we already kind of talked about it, about all of it. But when you see mushrooms growing in your yard or on a tree or whatever, that's just a fruit. You know,
Yeah.
it's a fruit.
Yes.
It's kind of like an apple on a tree. You have like this complete system that's underground and in the log that is, like we talked about, it, you know, helps with soil erosion and helps with breaking down this lignin and cellulose for the microbes and other organisms. You have this nutrient delivery system, which is the mycelium. You have communication pathways. You have, it's like mushrooms. If it wasn't for mushrooms, I don't even know if we would exist, actually. You know?
I'm not going to argue with you. I'll rewind in history here for a moment, because you talked about how if we didn't have fungi and there are lignin consuming bacteria, if we didn't have those two things, when a
Right.
tree fell, it would just be there. The reason we have coal is because we had a period where the forests rose about, I want to say about 600 million years ago or something like that.
That's a
And
long
there was
time.
a 300 million year period of time where we
Mhm.
had no fungi and
Yeah.
no lignin consuming bacteria. So when a tree fell in the woods, I don't know if it made a sound or not without a Tyrannosaurus to hear it, but we do know that it hit the ground and it pretty much just stayed there. And
This
it
is
either
correct.
stayed there till it was sedimented over
Hmm.
or until it burned.
Right.
And so what didn't burn was compressed by heat and time and turned into what today we call coal.
That's right.
And all the coal we have goes back to that period of time. Well, not okay, 99.9%, because somebody's gonna, please to explain how we
Yeah.
whatever. Okay, like 99% of all coal reserves in the world go back to that 300 million year period of time.
Hmm.
And that's why, like, whether there's going to be new oil created or not, I don't know. There ain't going to be any new coal, right?
Right.
Unless some kind of ecological thing cuts it off from the fungi, and then
Hmm.
maybe you'll get that. But you're probably going to end up with petrified forest. That's what you're
Right.
going to get. You're not going to get coal. The coal was made because the lignin was still there. All the chemical processes that break down wood never happened. So when it got under heat and pressure, it carbonized.
Hmm.
It basically pyrolyzed through Earth's heat. That's what coal
Hmm.
is. And
Right.
so if you don't have the fungi and the lignin consuming bacteria, like you said, that pile of wood chips will stay there forever.
That's right.
Nothing will ever break down for you.
Right. Yeah.
And I
Mushrooms.
think like the fact that that hyphae network is there, and that's not what you see in the mushroom, is not the fungi. It's the fruit of the fungi.
That's
It's
right.
really important. And it's like really cool. Like I've done experiments with, just went to the store and bought some oyster mushrooms. And then I found out like basically everything you need to cultivate an oyster mushroom is in the stem.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
So like once I saw a video on that, I'm like, I know what I'm going to do. And I pulled the little piece out of like 4 oyster mushrooms and threw
Yeah.
them in a great big jar, like a half-gallon mason jar. And all I started doing was throwing all my wet coffee grinds in there after making coffee
Yes.
every day. And
Mhm.
in like 2 weeks, I had a full jar of coffee grinds completely encased in hyphae.
Isn't that amazing?
It's
awesome.
so stupid easy.
Yeah, it
Right?
is.
You know,
It is.
it's so easy to do. It's not necessarily the best way to make the next generation of mushrooms, but you don't think
Right.
about getting hyphae into like compost or a garden.
Right. I know. I know. Yeah. So a mushroom is a fruit. It's kind of like a defense mechanism. What happens is that when you have these mushrooms and or mycelium is, let's say, on a piece of wood, and it's tunneling through and it's breaking down everything, and then it's the edge of the log, and it says like, "Uh-oh, what am I gonna do now? Like I don't have anywhere else to go," and so it pushes out a fruit, and
Yep.
inside of that fruit produces the spores, which can then fly, be carried off by wind or insects or whatever, and then it can go on another log, and those 2 spores can germinate again, and now it has more food. So that's what a mushroom really is.
It's also like fungi in general is weird. They call it the third kingdom. It's not a plant.
It's not a
It's
plant,
not an animal.
right?
It's a thing onto it. There's actually like a 4th and 5th kingdom of some weird stuff, but like
It's
it's big macro kingdoms that pretty much have gone everywhere in the world that's possible.
right.
Fungi are this kingdom of thing that we don't even fully understand yet.
I actually have a book that is called Plants Without Leaves. It's a book
Okay.
about mushrooms, but mushrooms are more closely related to humans than they are to plants, actually. But it used to be in the plant kingdom. They used to be. Now
Yeah.
they are on their own. Yeah.
Plants Without Leaves. Is that your book or a book that you just sell?
It's a very old book that I don't believe that it's in
Okay.
circulation anymore.
Yeah.
I can send you a picture of it. But
Okay.
I
So it's
have it.
not
I
on your
collect
site. Okay.
books
All
about
right.
mushrooms. No, it's not.
I was gonna pull it up if
It's
it was
not.
there. Okay. Okay. I got you now. Um,
Yeah.
can we really like people like when you tell them like it can actually help with erosion or pollution control? Can you explain how that works? I get it, but you're looking at this little mushroom and that's going to prevent erosion. Like a gabion full of rocks will prevent erosion, but it has a lot to do with infiltration, right, and percolation in the soils and things like that.
Right. Yeah. So mushrooms, as being our natural recyclers, like the heroes of the forest and your garden, they also can break down harmful chemicals. They can break down like gasoline. Oyster mushrooms are really known for that. They basically break things down into the smallest components that they possibly can. So carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and these things. And then they also preventing erosion, of course, because they're creating these mycelium mats and holding everything together, right? And then you could use them as filtration on if you have a gigantic pig farm and you have all of this runoff, you could actually use mushrooms as or create like these filters where you're filtering that water through this mycelium, and mycelium will capture all of the bad bacteria and it will completely break it down. It will eat it, right? Mushrooms on the side, I always tell people, don't pick mushrooms on the side of the road. Do you know why? Because they are really, really good at pulling metals or hyper accumulating metals out of the environment into their fruiting bodies. So one year I was driving by this dump, and I'm like, I wonder if we took a bunch of mycelium and took it into to this dump, and if it can hyperaccumulate heavy metals, it can also hyperaccumulate gold, maybe silver, and things like that. So just like the vast possibilities of mushrooms is just amazing to me.
Yeah.
So they break down herbicides. They break down like heavy like herbicides that they use in cow fields to, what's it called? I think it's called grazon. They kill it. They kill the thistle, right? Nothing breaks that stuff down. Nothing, but mushrooms will.
Yeah. The only thing I know that breaks down thistle other than mushrooms is geese.
Geese?
Geese think it's candy. When I moved in here, I had thistle everywhere. This property was extremely degraded. It's tough even now. I have about 4 inches of soil on most of the property, and it's over limestone. And I don't mean chunks, I mean slab. Like this is ocean bed under my property. And thistle was everywhere. There were very few trees. All the trees that were here were sick. And one of the first livestock I got was geese. And they went from thistle to thistle to thistle to
Unreal.
thistle. And in 2 years, there wasn't a thistle to be found. But yeah, fungi will break it down too. There's a lot of things like that.
What I was saying is that fungi, they will not break down the thistle, but they will break down the herbicides that are used to kill the thistle. Because if you use grazon in your yard to kill plants, you will not be able to grow tomatoes for many, many, many years.
Yes.
So,
yes. Yeah. And there's a lot of concern about residual herbicides now. I think it's a little over concerned, but it's well founded in the concern of itself that I'm going to take this horse manure, and the horse was fed a hay, and there's a pass through of the herbicide. And I'm like, if you get your composting right, it's not going to matter.
Right.
Because it is the biological activity that breaks that down anyway. But as bad as things like Roundup are, Roundup has like a 6-month half-life. Roundup, you expose it to UV, and it's got like a 2-week half-life. But something like Grazon can have like a 25-year half-life unless you have a biological element to break it down. You're also talking like remediation is a huge thing too, right? Because like I just talked to Alan Booker in Tennessee. I was up there last week, and he was talking about how they're doing remediation work in North Carolina from the storm. And one of the things they're using is basically wood chips and biochar inoculated with fungi to remediate like water flows and things like that.
Right.
And it's working incredibly fast.
It is, yeah. It's just a little hard to scale projects like that, like when you have, like, let's say, like mining areas where, like, how do you implement like so many mushrooms into that space to actually remediate it? I'm sure with with time, and it costs a lot of money as well, it will work, but it's just, like the scaling. That's where micro remediation, like, fails a little bit, is the scaling. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And they're really trying to scale it, like, and they're implementing it in many different ways up there. And
Yeah.
they're doing it wood chips, fungi, biochar, and compost. That
So
is
simple.
that
So
is the
simple.
and they have all these farmers helping that,
Mhm.
like, they're already using all four of those things. And they're
Yeah.
like, well, we don't know what to do. I'm like, well, let us tell you what you already have everything you need, right? Like,
Yeah.
and Alan's working really heavily with that. It's pretty interesting to see the overlap there. Um, what about people that just want to get started? Like, we've kind of talked, like, you can basically inoculate wood chips and put them into your garden. There's some other ways that people, like, let's say that, like, okay, great, I get the ecological benefit, but what they want to do is make mushrooms because they're expensive, and they want to grow their own mushrooms. They want to get into some level of, at least some level of self-sufficiency. I call it, like, whenever you have a supplier, like, can you get off therapy to where you have some level of, I can do my own propagation, things that hold over,
Yeah.
things like that. So where should people start if their main interest is, I want better soil and all, but I also want culinary benefit of mushrooms?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier you can also grow oyster mushrooms in your garden if you wanted to. It's also very simple. You're not gonna get like large fruitings as you would if you were growing them in a container, which is
Okay.
also very easy. Oyster mushrooms, they break down everything, like you said earlier: coffee grounds, cardboard, your t-shirt, like a banana fronds if you have in your yard and you don't know what to do with them. All you got to do is pasteurize them, and you can grow mushrooms on them. Grains. I mean, the list just goes on. Mushrooms will eat anything, really. I've seen pictures. People send me pictures all the time of like oyster mushrooms growing in like their bathroom out of
Yeah.
like rotten wood when they have a leak or something. But mushrooms are super easy to grow. If you just want to grow them on wheat straw, for example, all you got to do is pasteurize your wheat straw, mix in the mycelium or the spawn, and then just put it in a container, whether it be a 5-gallon bucket or nursery pot or a plastic bag or whatever you can find. Stuff it in there, let it colonize, poke some holes on the side, and have flushes and flushes of mushrooms.
And I think that's
Very easy.
really cool that can be done. And then we have all this, like, spent spawn, like, it's
Mm-hmm.
used up, it's taken all the energy, it stops fruiting. Well, then you just use that as compost or add it to your other compost systems. Like, generally that type of material I
Yeah.
can add as kickers into my bioreactors. Or if I'm not going to be building one
Right.
anytime soon, just pull the mulch back and straight into the garden. I mean, you
Right.
can only make things better with that, right?
This is true. Yeah. Even if you have your spent, you've grown your oyster mushrooms on your kitchen counter, and then you take that outside and put it around your plants, add a little bit more wood chips, and then you can have more mushrooms. It's so awesome. One of these containers that I grow in my house, it can fruit like 6 to 7 times. And the fruiting window between those is like, let's say, like it takes about 6 weeks from colonization to fruiting, and then every 2 weeks after that, you have a flush of mushrooms. It's
And then like people that maybe they want the, like, easy button. One of the things your website has, let me get that comment out of the way, is like these fruiting kits, right? Where they really,
Yeah.
like, most of the work's already been done.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And they're like, it comes with instructions, and you do what it says, and you keep it in the right environment, and then it just makes mushrooms for you, right?
All you gotta add is water. That's it.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
easy. Yeah.
And you got lion's mane, you got reishi,
Yeah.
you got white button.
Mm-hmm.
That are some plug kits as well. That's kind of a different thing that I'm trying to talk about right there. But
Yeah. There's all kinds. The blue oyster mushrooms and the pink oyster mushrooms. Those are super easy, just on the counter type of fruiting kits, and they do amazing. And
like, how many flushes could a like this blue oyster kit right now is $30, and Might I remind you, if you're a paying member, you could get 15% off. Like I buy this, I follow the instructions. It makes me a bunch of mushrooms. I cut them off, I eat them. About how many times might that flush for me before, okay, this is done and it's ready to be used some other way?
If you treat it right, it can literally fruit up to like 6 times. Really nicely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to order one today just because it
Yeah.
looks cool. You know, that's what, for those that are on the audio only, those blue ones and the pink ones, they look like what they're not. They look like something that's going to send you on a trip when you eat them, right? I'm sure you know who Paul Stamets is, because he's like the mushroom guru of the world. He talked about the first time he used medicinal mushrooms, and he didn't know anything about it yet. And somebody gave him like a whole bag of them, and he just ate them all.
Yeah.
And he ended up in a tree in the middle of a storm, kind of like the scene in Forrest Gump, where Lieutenant Dan's up in the ship yelling at God. And he's in the tree and he's moving. He said he could like feel in the distance, like he could feel the other trees like they were on his arms. Mm-hmm. And like, that's not what an oyster mushroom is going to do to you. But when you look at that blue oyster, it looks like something. If you get pulled over by a cop with it in your car, he's going to want to know something about it. But that's really easy. Add water, follow the directions, get mushrooms. And I guess you could use that spawn then. Once you like get into things like using your own coffee grounds or other material, you could take that spent spawn and you could kind of reboot it, right?
You sure can. You sure can. If it doesn't get contaminated, which can happen sometimes because molds are also attracted to that substrate, you can totally inoculate more. You can, from one bag of spawn that you get from us, that 5-pound bag, you can grow millions of pounds of mushrooms if you do it correctly. Okay. If you are, like if you pasteurize your substrate correctly and you grow them in a nice environment, you can either from the spent mushroom grow, you can expand that onto more substrate, or from your mushrooms that you pick, you can, like you were describing before, you can peel open the stem on the bottom, tease out some of that tissue out of there.
Yeah.
And you can put it on some wet cardboard, roll it up, put it in a little plastic bag, put it in your fridge. That within weeks, that's going to completely turn white. It's going to myceliate completely, and then you have spawn again.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, when I did the jar thing, I didn't even know if it would work. I just saw this dude on YouTube, and he went to like Whole Foods and bought an oyster mushroom, and then he was growing mycelium on like wheat berries that he had pasteurized. And I'm like, I'm just gonna throw coffee grind. I'm not gonna do shit. I mean, the coffee grinds are pasteurized when I use a French press, so like boom, when they come out of there, they're pasteurized right? And they're wet. So I'm like, I'll just throw it in there, and the whole thing turned completely, totally white. Like as I was adding it was eating it. Like it's really cool. Let's take some questions, and then I'll cut you loose because you've been very generous with your time here with us. Let's start off. Christopher says, how old can logs be for inoculation? I guess he's talking to like dowel spawn. I have lots of oak and hickory blown down from a tornado last August.
Sure. So last August, it's a little bit late. So you want to use logs that are anywhere from like you cut them down and then you have approximately 6 weeks to inoculate them, basically. So from a living tree to, because like we talked about earlier, mushrooms are very opportunistic, and they're always waiting for a tree's immune system to go down. So when you cut a tree down, its immune system is gone. And then these mushrooms move in very, very quickly and they colonize. And so 1 to 6 weeks, that's your window.
Okay, Lovecroft says, can I inoculate alfalfa, straw, goat manure from my barn with King Stropharia since I already mulched my garden with that?
Yes, but you also have to add wood chips.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they want some real carbon to kind of grab onto.
Absolutely.
That particular species anyway. Andy D, when getting started with the first time, which edible mushroom varieties would give me the best success for log plugs and wood chip piles? Well, I know the second one.
Yeah.
Plugs are a little different. There's a little more steps involved.
Yeah. The easiest mushrooms to grow on logs are going to be oyster mushrooms. Any oyster mushrooms and shiitake mushrooms are super easy. So those two are for beginners. And then for wood chip piles, of course, we've been talking about the garden giant this whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And just for everybody out there, if anybody ever says wine cap you, that's the same thing as King Stropharia.
King Stropharia, wine cap, or garden giant.
Garden
Those are
giant,
the three
okay.
names. Yeah.
Jesse, does it matter what kind of wood chips you use, such as pine, cherry, walnut?
It does. Yes, you want to use hardwood. Pine is it's got a lot of antifungals in it, and not a lot of mushrooms want to grow on it. You have like maybe cauliflower mushrooms will grow on that, and
Chicken
that's
of the
clog
woods.
the logs. Some chicken of the woods, and then Phoenix oyster
Okay.
enjoys it. And there's a few lion's mane also that will grow on pine. But
Okay.
for King Stropharia, you want to use strictly hardwood.
And I'm betting that walnut's not a problem. Everybody's worried about the
No,
juglone and walnut and pecan and
no.
all. That's primarily in the cambium, the leaves and the green stem. Like when you get remedial wood chips, that means just basically remedial wood chips means you've got everything. You've got leaf, you got twig, you got bark all together. It's a very
Right.
small amount of that. And I also think that is way overblown, and fungi are your solution. Because when I grew up with my grandparents, when you were telling your story about being a little girl and like basically kind of living off the land and subsistence gardening and foraging, I'm like, that's exactly how I grew up. Same way, just in Pennsylvania versus Europe. And we had 4 huge black walnuts kind of around our garden. And our garden never showed any signs of any kind of problems with the juglone. And it's because there were literally freaking mushrooms and mulch everywhere. And I'm not saying we raked up black walnut leaf and put it on the garden. That would be dumb. But in general, we just didn't worry about it. Nature let the leaves fall, and nature took care of the leaves. And if you want to deal with a situation with some sort of allelopathics, then mushrooms are the way to deal with that anyway. So I don't think walnut would be a problem at all.
I grow shiitake and walnut all the time.
Okay, there you
And
go.
I've never gotten sick, so you're good to go.
Yeah. If you start an area with King Stropharia, can I use the substrate as starter to create more beds in the future?
You can try so here's a way you would be probably the best way to do it. You can grab yourself a pile of wood chips and just inoculate those wood chips in one area, right? And then that can sit there for quite some time, right? It can sit there for 6 months, a year. It will keep breaking all that stuff down, and then just take from that pile and put it into your garden. And again and again. Now, when you're growing King Stropharia, if you're growing for fruit, you want to plant it in the springtime, right? You plant it in the springtime, and then it breaks down all of those wood chips, and it fruits in the fall, right? And then once you pick your mushrooms in the fall, that's when you add more wood chips. Okay, add more wood chips, because if you are just adding wood chips like year round, those mushrooms are never going to fruit, because they're like, oh well, I have plenty of stuff to eat here, so I don't need to fruit, right? So you want to be careful with that. Plant it in the springtime, pick in the fall, add more wood chips. By the springtime, you're going to have fruit again, and then let it fruit again in the fall, and then add wood chips. So you're adding wood chips every fall. But and then the only other thing about it is that the earthworms, they absolutely
migrate it.
They love this mycelium. So sometimes I get complaints from people that say like, well, I planted this bed and then all these earthworms came in and they ate all of my mycelium. And I'm like, yeah, you gotta like every once in a while, you gotta move your bed to another area.
Yeah. We had somebody earlier saying that when they inoculate with Stropharia, it's not long afterwards the chickens find it and tear it all up. And I'm like, yeah, that's because they can smell it and they know that there's good shit in there. And worms is one of those things. Like, you want chickens to show worms and pill bugs. Like, chickens are like, oh, this is crack cocaine on top of an ecstasy pipe, like, or something. Like, they love that stuff,
Right.
Okay, next one, Lovecroft. Would you be concerned about lead contamination in mushrooms grown near an old house? Maybe.
Yes, I would test your soil first of all, and then if you really believe that the soil is contaminated, don't eat the mushrooms. Just don't do it, because they will hyperaccumulate that lead into the fruiting bodies.
But if you wanted to clean the area up using multiple flushes and removing them, along with other bioactives and things like biochar, would be a great way to do that. Eventually, you'll lock everything up and make it inert. But initially, I would think you would have some concerns.
Hmm.
Just because your house is old doesn't mean the soil around it has lead in it, though. Like
Yeah.
Olga said, have it tested before you start worrying. I'll put it this way: if everything that they said would kill us, we'd have all been dead a long time ago. And if everything they said was healthy, we wouldn't be so sick right now.
Right.
So, I mean,
Right.
Ernie says, what is your favorite type of wood for edible mushrooms? I heard maple is best to inoculate with most mushrooms.
Maple is good, but oak is going to be the best. Oak is the best because it's very, very dense. And when you plant mushrooms on it, it takes the mushrooms a long time to get through all of it. So it's going to last the longest. It's going to fruit the longest and the best. So yeah, oak is going to be the best, but maple is great. Maple is great. I use sweet gum. Sweet gum
Yeah.
is like a trash tree over here in my woods. You cut one down, 10 more come up, and then you have like these sweet gum balls that are everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
Yeah, so sweet gum is great. It's very soft, and mushrooms, my sweet gum logs, they last for about like 5 years, for example. Or oak, it will last like 7 or 8.
Yeah, it's there's much more density there. On the
Yeah.
sweet gum balls, for those of you guys in our audience that are making biochar, which is a lot of you, sweet gum balls are a great biochar feedstock. And it crushes super easy at the end of the burn too. So there's that. Let's see. Go ahead.
And you can grow oyster mushrooms on the sweet gum balls. You can
There
grow
you
oyster
go.
mushrooms on the sweet gum balls too.
Now you got something for those little foot stabby thingies that come down out of the trees for you. And one of the things you mentioned was like several times you alluded to this, like there has to be a reason to fruit. So if you keep feeding it, it's like I have more energy. I don't need the fruit. There's so many things in life like that they need a little bit of a stressor to produce that which propagates the species. So like if you want really good sweet potato set, just as an example, then toward the end of the season, you need to cut back on your irrigation and let the plant stress a little bit, because then it's like, oh crap, I need to make sure the next generation goes. And that's what's happening when those mushrooms consume all of that lignin. And then they're like, okay, I'm kind of running out. I need to poof out and I need to spread myself. Right. So like there is a place for stress in nature. If you leave completely stress free, you never grow, you never propagate, you never expand.
Right.
It was asked, and I don't know if an answer was available. Can food grown in a bioremediation zone be eaten? Probably after you're done remediating, right?
Yes. And like when you're done remediating, yes, but of course you also need to test that soil, that you have been remediating. But at first, absolutely not. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the whole reason you're remediating.
Yes.
This is a question. It's not really a question, but Chris says, do you any of your sponsors sell mushroom kits or spore, etc.? Well, Mushroom Mountain is a partner with our members support brigade. And yes, there's a whole website we've been bringing up over and over again with, wonderful things on it, like this psychedelic looking blue oyster mushroom. And they have everything we're talking about and more, guys. They have fruiting kits. They have, what am I looking for? Some of the medicinal extracts and things like that as well that you guys can get your hands on from them. And they do a 15% discount, which is a great discount. So yeah, absolutely. Amy's asking a question I think is more directed at me than you.
Looks like it.
Can honey locusts be used for biochar? Yes. Any carbon can be carbonized, pyrolyzed into biochar. There's almost nothing you can't do, but maybe some things that are chemically infected that you shouldn't. But even those, like people worry about, like I get cutoffs from a cabinet maker to make biochar out of, and there'll be a little bit of plywood in there here and there, and it's got some glue in it. Yet once it has 600C on it, it's gone. I'm not too worried about it. If that's kind of unrelated to what we're asking or what we're talking about today. Question from Jesse: what if oak has been processed to make whiskey barrels? Is there any special treatment required?
It depends. Maybe can you expand on that to see like how it has been processed? Because are we using chemicals to process anything?
No, I think what he's talking about here is like a lot of times when whiskey barrels are used up, wine barrels are used up to the point where they just won't work anymore. They either get cut in half and sold to people to grow plants in, or they get shredded. And he's probably getting stuff like that. And I guess the only thing about that is when you make whiskey and you put it in a barrel, it's not just exposed to the charred part of the inside of the barrel. Literally, as heat changes, that's why they age these in these barns. The alcohols literally go into and out of the wood, and they pulse in and out of the wood over time. And I'm wondering if that might actually make it not the best thing in the world for a fungus to grow in, because it's been infused with alcohol. No,
absolutely not. You can just sterilize your wood, and you can grow any types, or if you're going to use it for your Stropharia project, as long as it's not completely degraded, the mushrooms are going to eat it. Gotcha.
Now, you said earlier, like with Stropharia, you don't need to sterilize.
You don't.
And it also sounds like maybe you shouldn't.
You can, like, we sterilize sawdust in our laboratory to make sure that when you, as our customer, gets the King Stropharia spawn, that's what you get. You don't get green mold, and you don't get, like, bacteria and all kinds of different things, but if you're just growing your garden and you're going to be putting this stuff into your garden anyways, there's tons of other mushrooms that are growing in that garden as well. Since you are introducing a step away from just spores, you already have like mated spores, and you have mycelium. It has kind of like it's like a head of the game, right? So it's going to eat those wood chips. So as long as the wood chips, like, up to like 2-3 months old, then you can totally use them, and you don't need to do any special treatment to it.
Well, this has been great. I'll remind everybody the website is mushroommountain.com. If you are one of the thousands of members of the MSB, you also get a discount that if you're going to do a lot with mushrooms, probably cover your membership cost over a year. So thank you for that great discount, Olga. That would be great. And I'd actually love to get you back on, because we're at 1:15. We need to wrap. We could have a whole other show this long just on medicinal properties and the formulations you have. So, whenever you get around to it, fill out another form. We'll get you back on to talk about that.
Okay.
And you have final word to the audience before I cut you loose, if you got anything else to say.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and everybody that listened to this. Thank you for listening in, and I appreciate you all. And now I want you guys to go out there and go find like 10 mushrooms and figure out if any one of them is King Stropharia.
Okay. All right.
And then come visit me at Mushroom Mountain.
And it should be like understood, but if you don't know what it is, don't eat it.
Do not eat it.
There are mushrooms that will make you happy, and there are mushrooms that will make you sad, and there are mushrooms that will make you dead. Right.
Yes.
And there's not a lot of forgiveness in between some of those gradients.
Right. This is correct. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Olga.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. All right, guys, that was a great interview. I definitely do want to get her back on real quick. Thank you to Amy B for the $20 super chat while we were working today, right there at the end. Very much so. Every little bit helps. That is definitely gas money, or actually in this case, it's most of what I'm going to spend. As soon as I get off, I'm going to order one of those freaking blue mushroom kits, just because it's an easy button, and pick one of those up. And with that, let's go ahead and close up the show. I want to remind you guys again real quick, May 12th, Loss of Life comes out. I have a lot of work into this book. It really is written as a lifestyle design book. It's good for entrepreneurs, but it's good for anybody that wants to get their life and keep their life on the right track. I've talked about my laws of life over the years, off and on, here and there. And I'll say, like, Spirit Goes Law of Life number 9. And there really is no numbers to them. These are just the things that I've built my life and my businesses on. And I wanted to share them with everybody else. Of course, one of the ways that we actually make a living around here is with reviewed products. And today's item of the day is available on Amazon. It's the end grain wood bamboo cutting board you've heard me talk about many times. And the reason I brought it around today, I got a price alert on it. It's at like $44. It's the cheapest this thing has ever sold. It's sold this cheap before. It's never been lower than this. And it's a bamboo cutting board that's very affordable. Translation, you know where it comes from. China, right? It comes from China. And as that is the case, the tariffs will hit. And the one place they will hit hard is consumer level goods out of China, right? So if you've been wanting to pick one of these up, I would do it now. I'm not saying they're going to be $80 in a couple weeks, but they could be. I just don't know. And the price, I would recommend you pick it up anyway. If you try one of these, you'll see why I love this thing. I'm a board addict, meaning I have cutting boards from everywhere. I go on vacation. I generally come home with a cutting board. My wife has told cut me off of my cutting board addiction because I have way too many boards. It's like sometimes I'm like, I don't feel like I have that many boards. She's like, because I put those in this cabinet and this cabinet and this cabinet. I'm like, oh yeah, right. I remember now. But the one I reach for when I'm cutting meat, when I'm dicing vegetables, when I'm doing any real work is this, because the performance is there. I've had mine for 8 years. It's a little bit darkened and stuff from being maintained with mineral oil and all, but it is as good as new after 8 years of daily use. And I paid about $80 for mine 8 years ago. So you can get it for half the price today. I really recommend it. And remember, you can always help us out just by starting any of your online shopping at tspaz.com. No matter what you buy there, if you're buying from Vivor or Amazon, you'll help us out. And when you go by T-Spaz, remember there's a couple links on that page that can be really beneficial. One to the Amazon Renewed store, which can save you a lot of money. And if you read up on what Renewed is, I won't go over it today, you'll understand why you should be using that. And then the Amazon outlet, like both of those are ways at times that you can save a lot of money. Anyway, with that, I'm going to wrap up. Man, this week feels off kilter to me. I came home Sunday. I was beat. Started doing, going back to the regular scheduled programming on Monday. Kids weren't here because of a swap day. And like now it's Thursday already. And the week just seemed to get away from me. But we will have that expert show for you tomorrow, Friday flashback. And then next week we'll do it all again. Thank you to everyone. Jesse, you've got a question. If you want me to answer it, email it to me, man. We are going to wrap up now. Take care, guys, and have a great day.